Welcome back to another episode of In Focus with Haversine Funding, the podcast where we discuss insights, trends, and strategies that drive success within specialty finance. I'm your host, Nolan Reichert. Today we have a very special guest. We have Robert Beard. Robert, thank you so much for joining us.
Great. Thank you, Nolan. It's been a real honor and pleasure to be here with you today.
Absolutely. We're excited to have you on. And for our viewers or listeners that may not be familiar with Robert, Robert has 36 years in factoring, with a couple of decades focus in transportation. Today, I just want to sit down with you and talk to you about your journey. You had built Pay for Freight, successfully sold it twice, most recently to Porter Freight Funding. And I would just love to walk through your experiences, your journey, how you went from an idea to having a successful transportation factoring company and the ups and downs that go with it and, the headaches, the sleepless nights. So thank you so much for joining us. Just kind of jumping right into it, Robert, can you walk us through the beginning? How did you get into factoring? Where did it all start?
Well, again, thank you, Nolan. I started in factoring after 8 years in mortgage banking, where I'd done everything possible. Even had my own little mortgage brokerage company for a little while.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
And got hit in the head with, one of the real estate, downturns. And I thought, it's just time to get something maybe a little more stable or just go a different journey.
Right.
And so then I was first joined Riviera Finance, which is, everyone knows, is kind of the leader in training the competition, so to speak. And so I was a good study for about 7 years, and then moved on to the next chapter of my life in another company, and just kept increasing my knowledge and my skill and my management tenure, and until again 2008, the recession 2008, decided, okay, I'm 50 years old, it's time to jump out in the deep waters.
What a better time to do it.
I mean, exactly. Yeah. When you had all these more brokerage houses all falling like flies, it was interesting. So again, when you start with, even though it was a recession, start with zero, all you can do is go up.
Yeah,
in my opinion. So we started there in March of 2008, and it took me, really, to be honest, 19 months to turn my first profit.
Wow.
But I had a great investor behind me, and my will to succeed at whatever cost.
Right.
It was not easy, but it had some interesting highlights or lowlights, I guess, whatever you want to call it. But at the end, once we started turning up profit, it just caught on fire, and provided me and my family and the families of all the employees that worked for me during those years with a good living, and I'm most proud of that. That was a big highlight for me. Or it was a big checkbox to make sure that when I sold the business to Porter Freight Funding, is that I had all of my key people not just in management but also on the front lines coming along with me. I didn't want anyone to not have a job. Now, of course, you're not going to bring on 100% of everybody, but I was able to bring over all the right pieces to Porter Freight Funding to affect a really smooth integration of their systems.
Yeah, that's a very interesting journey. We'll dive in a little bit more. So you mentioned that you started out in the mortgage lending space.
Yes.
What got you into factoring? Did you know what factoring was? Did you just kind of stumble into it?
I did stumble into it. Actually, one of the ladies I worked for, who was a mentor of mine for many years, when I was in the savings and loan industry, she had said, "Hey, Robert, they were getting ready to close the branch down where I was, originating mortgages." And I said, "Well, I'm over here doing factoring at Riviera." I said, "Well, we could use a salesperson." I said, "Salesperson? Okay. Well, let me go investigate this."
Right.
And it seemed to be an interesting way of financing America's small businesses. And I thought, well, I've been on the residential lending side, so let's go to kind of an extension of helping consumers who have businesses and affect their cash flow. So I thought, well, let's do that. So I was hired, and after about 10 months, I thought, sales is probably not my bag at this point in my life.
Right.
So luckily, they brought me in-house to become an account executive.
Mm-hmm.
And so I learned every single thing in servicing risk, servicing customers, all the pieces needed to start my career in, thinking about how can I better serve any customer, regardless of what their industry was. And we had various industries there at Riviera, and so it gave me a really good background. And then later on, the opportunity to specialize in transportation, which I really enjoyed. I spent a lot of time in transportation.
So as you were with Riviera, you had moved on, specialized in the transportation vertical, and then fast forward to 2008. That is where you took the leap to start Pay for Freight.
That's correct. Yeah.
So walk me through those the first iteration, the first months of Pay for Freight. So you had had your foundation of factoring, you had your foundation of transportation. What did that look like? Building the team out, building the operations piece. Can you just kind of give me an inside view on that?
Well, it was definitely interesting in terms of building it, one person at a time, and getting the right office space. But again, I just had this vision in my mind on how I wanted to create it, and it took a little while. We had a little bit of a back step. My first investor. I was the guy who found the money and set up all the banking relationships. But then my partner at the time, he was the marketing guy. He was supposed to bring in all the rain and all the crops and et cetera. But sadly, he passed 6 months into our venture, and so I had to figure it all out at that point in time. So luckily, when you're calling and being in the business as long as I had been. I knew a lot of people that were doing small transportation deals, and I would go in there and anything you don't like, too small for you, so I'll take on. I'll take it on for you, And so it took a little bit of a while to get that going, but again, just keeping steady,
just chopping away a little bit, yeah.
So it was great. I mean, it was literally one of my favorite books is Chop Wood, Carry Water. It was definitely is every day working on your craft and making yourself better every day, and that book was inspiration for me, and I've required many of my employees to also read it.
I'll have to get a copy.
And so anyway, but 19 months into it, we were really rolling. I'd got my website going. I was doing digital marketing. And I'd never done any of this before. So it was a lot of trial and error, made a few mistakes.
You were already, I
mean, I was already in it.
Turn around.
I was in it to win it.
Yeah.
Failure was not an option at all with wife and 3 kids and living in a nice area. It was not going to, it had to work.
Right.
And it did, and I'm very proud of that. And then, as the company evolved, we just kept doing more and more, because again, I was one of the very first factors that actually bought a freight bill of a fax copy.
Really?
Yeah. And so, but I was able to get the brokers to pay, and then of course there were some that wanted the original. I said, okay, well, we'll get you the original.
Yeah.
And so I told my carriers, oh, by the way, you've got 5 days to get your originals into me, or we're gonna have to. I want to charge you a penalty,
Right.
Well, that penalty became a profit center.
You were getting them in 5 days?
Yeah, I was not getting them in 5 days. And of course, a couple of these frequent flyers who were always not getting them in time, they sometimes had some large bills. And but again, I had to have them. So either you're going to give it to me or I'm going to charge it back, or, I won't take money away from you. Just here's a little fee to
give you a little shove,
a shove, and
get it in.
And sometimes it motivated them, and sometimes it didn't. But again, It was.
It seemed to work out.
Yeah, I was trying to
yeah.
get my collateral in here,
Mm-hmm.
but then I didn't go on to realize, okay, I can make some money off of
Right.
this.
Mm-hmm.
So that would.
You'd mentioned something that it's inspirational. You said when you had no choice, you had a wife and kids, and one of my favorite things I always tell myself is if you give yourself an option,
Mm-hmm.
that's what makes things hard. But if you don't give yourself any other choice, you just have to figure it out. It becomes so much easier because there isn't an out. There is no quitting. There is no, you don't have that choice, that luxury. And it's the second that luxury creeps into your head that, oh, I could just quit. I could just not show up today. Well, that's when you're shooting yourself in the foot and things really get hard. You can't give yourself that option. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And that thought never crossed my mind.
Yeah, it can.
Never,
I mean, yeah.
it can.
Yeah, people depend on you. So, at what point when you had started Pay for Freight, did you say, I've got something here? Or, maybe not quite yet, I've made it, because I have a feeling someone like yourself never had that satisfaction where you said, oh, I made it. This is good. But what was that first moment where you said, hey, I'm on to something? This can be something big.
When I was able to, I tracked it all the time, even in the early days, is that my client retention was so high in terms of the number of months that my clients stayed with me. I knew that my service was better than most factors out there at the time, and I just knew I can, and I used that to get more referrals from my current clients, and also able to to post actual, real, honest reviews on Google. And it's also cute, also nice to know when someone calls in and asks for information. They're talking to the president of the company.
Yeah.
Now later on, of course, I did start a sales team and the like, but that was a big entry for me and into the lives of these truckers. They got tired of automated phone lines,
absolutely,
voicemail, return calls that never returned.
Right.
And that was something that was always very important to me. To I don't have to give you the answer right now, but I'm going to get back to you.
Right. Yeah.
I want to talk to my operations team, or of course I make a lot of decisions on the fly on the phone. But anyway, I want to sometimes confirm that I'm not overselling something. But anyway, so I just knew that my little niche and how I serviced these carriers was something that was different than a lot of other factoring companies. No disrespect to them, but I felt my growth was predicted based upon that.
Right.
And that and trying to just be as technology savvy and implement as any of the new things that come on board as quickly as everybody else is, or along the same time, not be too far behind. So I was always willing to take that risk of adapting either a software or a process, modifying a process or a procedure to where it gave, it was more win-win for the customer, but also it was also insulated with risk management tools to make sure we didn't get taken advantage of.
And what you had just mentioned, that's how a lot of groups are driving their growth today. Specifically on the operation, how can we make life easier for these carriers? By nature that they're fairly simple, it's a simple group where they want ease. They don't want to have to make their life any harder. They want to get on the road, and they don't want to have to wait for these invoices to get paid. It's a simple solution, but the service side, that goes so far because what's different from a lot of factoring groups that's very specific to transportation is a lot of it is driven off of referrals.
Definitely.
They know each other, they talk constantly, and there's so many options when you're looking at factoring companies today that if I can ask you, hey, who do you factor with? How do you like it? I'm going to take that at so much more value than going online and just typing in best factoring company. That gets me nowhere, because I don't know if you've ever done it. I have. Every link is a different list.
Right.
And it feels like half the lists are sponsored lists.
Yeah.
So it's, hey, pay to be number one.
Yeah.
So that client focused mindset, is so important. And I think a lot of groups say, hey, it's a race to the bottom, and they're not understanding that people will pay a little bit more to have that personal connection, to have that touch.
Totally agree.
Yeah. And kind of shifting gears here, you were in transportation factoring for, a little over 2 decades. Is that right? So you got to see a lot of ups and downs. How did what were some of the shifts that you had seen in the industry, and kind of where it's at today?
Well, of course, you're always going to have your economic ups and downs. There were certain years that were just not as good for transportation due to economic forces that we all had to deal with. We had COVID.
Yep.
But I think that in looking back, on the COVID experience, a lot of us factoring companies, especially in the transportation space, actually came out a lot better than other businesses that had equal market share or market visibility that maybe didn't do as well. We were very blessed to be, but going back to the first 60, 90 days of that, started in March, was not fun. But once things kind of came back to normal in June, then it was to the races after that. But yeah, I've seen then some, 2017 wasn't a really great year. Neither was 9 wasn't very good either. But again, when you're starting at zero, everything's positive.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter. But yeah, and I think that luckily, and then 2020, again, it was a little bit of a down, but then 21, 22, 23 were really good, and 24 was 23 and 24 were probably where the market really was searching for, again, because all these shippers had to pay so much during COVID.
Yeah.
They said, you know what, I am not going to pay that again. So it's now your time to give me some of my profits back that I lost when you held me hostage on all these all these lows and higher rates. So, and I think that was probably the time, 24, end of first quarter of 24. We didn't, 23 was okay. I mean, it was a really good year, but I started to see the trends that the prices are not getting any better. You've got more people coming into the industry. You have the clients that you are putting on are not staying on very long. So it's kind of just a constant, loop of, adding, subtracting, and subtracting. And I thought, what, I've been doing this for a long time. And I just didn't like, personally, where this thing was headed. I didn't see that the turn was going to happen anytime soon. And I kind of felt, even though we think, well, it's going to be another quarter.
Yep.
Maybe 2 more quarters.
That was like the general sentiment that's been going on for the past 18 months.
But it's still that way.
Yes.
We don't know 6 months from now where this thing is going to be. And I thought, I've spent a lot of time in this industry. I spent a lot of time working from the age of 13 to now. I said, it's time to say goodbye. So I sold the business to Porter Freight Funding in October 2024. And I'm very happy. No, I'm sorry, 2023. My bad.
So can you walk us through? So you had sold twice, most recently to Porter Freight Funding.
Correct.
Can you walk us through? Because I guess to kind of give some picture behind the question.
Sure.
A lot of business owners, they're always having that question, right? And should I sell? Is it right? What do I do? Yes or no? You got to experience it twice. I'm sure the good, the bad, the ugly of it. So what was the determining factor when you said, okay, I want to sell? And then what was that process like? So for our viewers and listeners that might be thinking about selling or even acquiring, what advice would you give, and what kind of led you that decision, and your takeaways from it?
Right. Well, the context of the first sale was the fact that I needed lower cost of funds.
Mhm.
I was being financed by a specialty lender,
Okay.
and I just couldn't, even though I'd paid back all the sub debt, I was another ATM machine for this specialty lender. I thought, okay, well, if we can compete, I need lower cost of funds.
Right.
And I thought, well, if you're not going to give it to me, I'm going to have to go somewhere else and find it. So that was a decision based upon economic necessity,
Right.
and also personal preference of wanting to make more money, so we can take the company to a higher
Right.
status than we were at that point in time. So I basically put a search out there, talk to some people in the industry,
Mhm.
say I'm looking to sell, and I was lucky. Well, I was blessed enough to actually have a large 3PL purchase me in February 2017,
Mhm.
and immediately I was able to get bank-like financing. It was a tremendous margin enhancer
Yeah, I can
for
imagine.
me, and for the partnership. I was always the operator. My new partner was busy running his and growing his 3PL. So whatever you need, Robert, you just call me when you need something.
Yeah.
So I love that. Again, no touch, no management, but that
That's
oversight
right.
from ownership, even though I was part of ownership, and it just gave me the flexibility and the confidence to continue on making decisions I made to further grow and enhance the
Mhm.
company.
So that first sale, you got to keep the team, you got to
Yep.
keep everything, the name, um, and I think that's what a lot of business owners that worry creeps in. It's like, okay, well, am I going to be able to keep all of that? Am I going to,
Right.
are they going to want to come in and have a little bit overreach?
Mhm.
And I think that gives some owners pause. But it sounds like the first sell was was a great partnership, and then so walk me through from there to the most recent sell to Porter Freight Funding.
Yes, I think I'd made the decision. It was time to sell,
Mhm.
and I will say to any business owner out there, you know when that time is.
Mhm.
You don't have to worry about making a decision by the end of this day. Your mind will tell you, and your heart will tell you
Right.
it's now time.
Mhm.
Uh, and at least that's what worked out for me. And I think that many business owners who have sold or retired, as I have, um, they just know.
Yeah.
And I think and then at the end of the day, well, what's my company worth? What can I
Yeah.
get for it?
Uh-huh.
And so as I was going through the first process, what I also carried on the second sale process in my mind was, okay, what type of company is a good partner for me and my
Mhm.
employees? Because I wasn't really quite ready to retire just yet,
Right.
but I wanted a good place uh, that a company that had the same culture that I had built
Mhm.
over the years, from the top down. And luckily, I'd known Mark Porter and John Lamb with Porter Freight Funding for a number of years. Actually,
Right.
I met them the first time I sold, but we just we hit it off really well. We just stayed in contact.
Yeah.
Um, they would, I would get some questions from them from time to time, and I don't mind helping anybody.
Right.
I don't think this is as proprietary as some people think it is. It's how you do the process. It's sometimes different than what other people will
Right.
do. So this is not rocket science. But anyway, so I looked for a company because that I could assimilate with, and basically maybe and really I wanted to help them grow.
Mhm.
And if I help them grow, it's part of the pay for freight legacy. And I know I've done that through the sale and the great partnership that I've had with Porter Billing and Porter Freight Funding. So at the end of the day, it was kind of like a match made in heaven. Really,
Mhm.
it was. I thought it was really a new marriage.
Right.
So
Yeah, and those are great guys over there. So that's so important. Thankfully, transportation factoring space, it feels like a small community in a sense. Like a lot of groups know, others, so it's a little bit easier to determine,
Mm-hmm.
if it's a culture fit, because a lot of times you've been running into these individuals, the past however many years, and you get a good sense. So a couple things I really want to pick your brain on, though.
Okay.
Tell me, when you were building your team, you were your employee number one. Um, how did that look like? And how did you build a culture that you wanted? What were some lessons that you learned along the way? That's so important to your success. You're only as good as your worst player, right?
Right.
So it's like,
Exactly.
how do I make sure that my team is mirroring the beliefs that I have and the character that I want in this organization, without having to learn, in such a hard way, which I'm sure there were lessons that you had to learn.
Oh yeah, I've got a few employee stories probably I could share off camera. But the main thing I went into this because when I started out, I didn't have a big budget to hire people. So my so I started just hiring people that I felt had good attitude,
Mm-hmm.
seemed to have a really good work ethic, and that were generally speaking happy people.
Right.
You know, and I would train them. I can if you do those three things, I can train you.
Right. Yeah.
You're trainable.
Exactly.
But so I didn't for a long, long time actually hire anybody with experience in factoring.
Really?
I wanted to teach them my way,
Uh-huh.
not the way I factor.
Okay.
And Pay for Freight's always been a true non-recourse factoring company.
Mm-hmm.
And it just it's just an easier sell. It's easier to manage.
Mm-hmm.
It's easier to teach.
Yeah.
Because once that reserve account happens, it gets a little complex to some people,
Right.
And at this point, my clientele, there's these, truck companies, less than 50 trucks.
Mm-hmm.
They need someone that can make it easy for them,
Right.
and that was always my goal. So, and I'll say, even as I grew the company, we would need certain skill sets. Even then, I would try to find someone that had experience. Say my credit manager. I wanted to make sure that person had credit experience, but didn't have factoring experience, because I really felt I could train the factoring side. If you're a good credit grantor, the factoring part is the easy part,
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion. I've had operations managers that I've started from scratch with, and I've had some that had some factoring experience. And I hired one young lady, and she was from a large factoring company, and it was so interesting. She even relocated up to the Dallas Fort Worth area to be to be close to the office. And as she listened to me in my office do what I do,
Uh-huh.
and this person's been in a static environment, staying in the box.
Yep.
It kind of really she couldn't understand how it all really worked.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're an entrepreneur, you're making decisions based upon what you feel is the right decision. And
Right.
sometimes it always doesn't follow the exact process, but it kind of just blew her mind that, and I was tagging her to be my real number two person.
Right.
And I think I scared her off. Well, actually I did scare her off. And 9 days later, she went back to where she came from. And I thought, wow. So, I've tried to not hire, people with factory experience, because it's been, except for one person.
Yeah. That's so interesting.
Jan Bella is a prize like no other.
Yeah.
And when I was able to pull that off, that was a highlight.
Yeah.
At Underpay.
That was the other milestone. Yeah.
And I just got a great credit manager who is just the tops in Terry LaMarche, and they were, and I had a controller that was I hired right at the start. And so that was the nucleus of my management team. And they were They were fearless, and they took care of me
Yeah.
more times than not.
Yeah.
But no, it was a great team, and I love them all to death still today, and they're doing really well.
I think that is such a underrated part of business owners, is building and creating that culture. Um, Oftentimes it's so overlooked, and you're just looking at, the balance sheet, the bottom line, but it's the real engine is the team and that culture that you create, that you had what took from a vision and made it work. Because the people at their core, to a sense, are unreliable. You cannot fully put 100% faith that the person you hire is going to do exactly what you train them to do. People aren't going to enjoy it. People are going to leave. And so to have that constant where you're, there's not any bad apples, that, because it can spread. It's so underrated and often overlooked. Another thing that I'm really interested in hearing your thoughts on, to our guests and audience, is working out of a bad deal. A lot of people don't like to talk about it. They feel like, but it happens to everyone. Everyone gets bit, or else, it's not an if, it's a when, and it has nothing saying that from an operational perspective, you're it's just a part of it. It's a learning lesson. What advice would you give to business owners that you learned about, having to work out of a deal or getting bit?
Well, I think any factor worth their salt. If they haven't been bit, they will be bit.
Yes.
And most of everybody that I know in this industry has been, and I'm no exception. And you do learn a lot when you realize you've had a fraud. And I had mine early on. That you could become a little bit more diligent.
Yep.
You question a lot more, and you want to try to meet this person. And even though it may sound like it's a tough task to pull off, it's something I recommend. But that was a large account that went bad early. It was a professional fraud, mid 6-figure loss, but learned a lot from it. And every fraudster has their way of pushing the envelope just a little bit farther to see if you're paying attention.
Yeah.
And luckily, I woke up at day 35 of this one, but it was already a big amount. But I think, and to answer your question, I think if you go into the issue and talk with a client about, I really want to help you get me paid whole.
Yep.
I'm not here to throw you out of business. I want to work with you to where you still have a good business once this obligation is satisfied. Right. If you go and play hardball really quickly, they'll just say, I'm not going to play ball with you. The
natural reactions, defense.
Yeah. And I think that, taking that kind of tack, we was able to get our money back relatively. It may be a little bit longer than we would have bought, but we got it back. And then we still kept the client. And then the client became a really good client.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I mean, I've had several situations where.
That's interesting. I wasn't expecting that turn.
Yeah. I mean, some of them are, there's some that will pay you back, or some of them will escape for a while, but they always have to come back.
Yeah. Yeah.
That UCC helps a lot.
Yeah. No, it's, and a lot of times through these losses, that's where you identify the gaps where you can improve on. And it's like, we had a cybersecurity group on here, and it was a great conversation. You mentioned they start out just by seeing how much they can get away with. And it might start with just a desperation. Hey, I'll submit one fake invoice. I'm in a crunch. Oh, I can get away with that. Like, and they push the envelope, and a lot of times it isn't, I wouldn't say bad intentions. I mean, not great intentions, but they feel like they're doing something good to help, whether it's to make payroll or whatever the case may be. But with our cybersecurity guests, same thing. They said these hackers a lot of times will sit and they'll wait. They won't get in and immediately do something. it's, test the waters and then bam. But, um, I could sit here and talk to you, pick your brain. I will offline, all day, because it's so interesting. You have so much to learn from, and I think a lot of our guests and audience can take away a lot of the lessons that you experience. But I just want to say, first and foremost, thank you so much for taking on the invite and joining us. You've had such a successful and long career, and hopefully I still see you around. I'm not sure if you'll be at the events, but you're right down the road, so we'll have to keep in touch. And
Absolutely.
maybe I'll call on you just to get some more advice or your thoughts on something. But
Always.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. That there's so much more that we can touch on, but it's been a great time.
Likewise, my friend.
All right. And to all of our viewers and listeners at home, thank you so much for joining us on another episode of In Focus with Haversine Funding. Remember to stay informed, stay inspired, and stay on course to growing your financial platform. Until next time.